Today's guest is Cory Swanson. Cory currently serves as a Broadwater County Attorney and has also served for many years in the Montana Army National Guard and currently holds the rank of colonel. During today's episode, we're going to learn about his run for the Chief Justice of the Montana Supreme Court and hear about his fight in the global war on terror and his tours overseas. This is going to be a great episode. Stand by.
69 foot pursuit. Stop! Stop!
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, I'm excited.
I am too. I didn't even know you had a podcast till recently, and I started following it.
Yeah.
And
oh, thank you.
I want to talk about the campaign, but first I'm curious about your intro music. What was that from?
So that is actually recorded from one of our deputies in a foot pursuit. That's actual live recording of it.
Yep.
And it's just kind of, it's the Pursuit podcast, so it's to kind of get people's blood flowing a little bit, get them ready to go. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you following it. That's exciting.
I've heard a few of those foot pursuits in my day, but
yes, you have.
I get to listen. I'm the Monday morning quarterback. I get to sit back and listen to it in the comfort of my office. I don't have to be the guy out on the street doing it.
Exactly. Well, I'm kind of that guy now too.
Yeah.
What do I call myself? An inside cat now?
Is that right?
Yeah, that's the technical term for it. Yes.
There you go.
So I'm super excited about having you on. Just my background with you it was super fascinating. Is you put in your resume for the tag position. And
so you're about to tell a secret story that no one knows, but that's okay. Go ahead.
Oh no, I didn't know it was a secret. I thought it was public information.
Go ahead. It is now.
But okay.
Breaking news on the podcast. Go ahead.
But you had dropped a resume for that,
I did.
And I was so impressed. Literally, I had you in my top 2 for candidates for it.
Mm-hmm.
I really did. I thought your resume looked great. I thought I really liked your local background. So I got a really good initiation into obviously a lot of things because the governor had selected me to sit on that board to select it, and it was fascinating. I had to learn I didn't serve in the military, so I had to learn so many things. Mm-hmm. And it was trial by fire. But I was so impressed. And it was funny because I think that was when I put it together that you are my pastor's brother. And I'm like, I knew who you were, but I just hadn't connected dots. And It was hilarious because I think I'd called you about it. And I was like, what? I don't, this is hilarious.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, you were like, you're Nate's brother? Oh, okay. And
I know. Montana got smaller.
So many dots for me right now.
So the backstory, first, years ago, Nate, so my brother is Nate Swanson, in case people don't know that. He's pastor of a church here in Great Falls called New City.
Yep.
And years ago, Nate had told me that he had met you, and I think at the time you were a detective. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Doing some tough cases. And I was moving into the prosecution world and learning going to a lot of trainings and learning about how to prosecute. And I think sex cases are probably the hardest cases to prosecute. So I was learning a lot about that. And then Nate just mentioned a conversation he had with you, and I don't even know what year this was. So I knew who you were. That was it. I had known your dad a little bit when he was in Gallatin County, and then when he worked for Governor Martz. And then finally, the legend of Jesse Slaughter kind of grew when you ran for sheriff. So that was how I
think it's more the myth.
The man, the myth, the legend. Let's do it all. Yeah. So.
No, that's awesome. No, it's crazy how small our world is. I mean, it's just, I've also worked with you on the legislative side.
Mm-hmm.
We're on a lot of conference calls together, strategizing how we're going to deal with certain pieces of legislation. One of the things that I always respected about you and I really enjoyed is you were typically with lawyers, and this is just my experience kind of across the board. The exception probably being you and my own county attorney, Josh Rackey, is they typically will side on what's more convenient for me in my prosecutions. How do I make my prosecutions easier? And I was watching you it must have been, I'm guessing it was the 2021 session.
Might be.
It could have been the 19 session. I don't remember when I first started seeing you on those calls. One of the things I really respected about you is you don't concern yourself with that on those calls. You talk about it, you acknowledge it, and you say, this could be a problem for us in the future to prosecute a case. But always what I hear from you is, well, constitutionally it's sound. Yeah, it's it's not good for us, but it's legal. And you're astute in knowing, and they have the votes for it to pass. So we need to start addressing how we're going to deal with it, not because we waste so much time, right, trying to stop something that we can't stop.
Yeah.
And then we didn't really actually go in and say, well, how do we make this bill work for us so that we can keep the public safe, but yet allow for the people to have their freedoms?
Yeah.
And you're really good about that. We're probably going to talk about that quite a bit on this podcast today, but that was one of my first interactions with you. And I remember, I think we were talking about probably a gun bill or something like that, because that was probably what it was. And just you interjected and you were like, whoa, guys, it's going to pass. This is what we need to do. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, the number one lesson, right, is to be able to count votes, because that's where it comes down to, whether that particular committee or whether the full House, the full Senate. So, yeah, so I got pretty involved in the Montana County Attorneys Association. I mean, I was first elected Broadwater County Attorney in 2014. My first few years, I was just, trying to figure out what to do, because I had done a lot of law, but I had never done any criminal law, no prosecution at all. So, so my first few years, I wasn't even worried about the state association. I was just focused on what I had to do to prosecute my own cases. Eventually, I got involved in the leadership stuff and in the legislative stuff, because I had previously worked at the legislature and I had previously actually lobbied a little bit, which is why I became a county attorney, because I didn't want to lobby. I'm like, this is not my career choice. But the background was really helpful to understand the process and to understand how laws get made, and not only that, but there's so many procedural things that happen from an idea to a governor signing a bill, that the give and take and the amendment process and all that really helped me when then it came time for county attorneys to deal with some legislation. The 2017 legislative session was I thought a very anti-law enforcement, anti-prosecution session. There were a lot of bad bills that came out of it. We've kind of actually undone most of that damage, but not all of it. So after the 2017 session, I was reelected in 2018, and I said, okay, I think I can start getting more involved here. So 2019 I was a bit, and then 2021 I was a lot more, and I think that's when you and I first talked. And I think this education, or at least this experience, goes into my approach when it comes to judges too. As a prosecutor, as a law enforcement officer, we need to know where the lines are, right? We need to do our job. Guy out on the street who's working midnight and sees something needs to know procedurally, how I address something strange that I see, where I'm following procedures that I know are correct. I'm not violating anyone's rights, but I'm also not letting a dangerous person go on and hurt somebody. So we want lines to be fairly clear. We want the law to be clearly understood. We want it to be predictable. And my view has always been, if I know where the line is, I'll ensure that that's how we prosecute and that the cops know. And if sometimes cases go bad and you have to have that conversation, that's all part of the deal. Within that arena of how we protect the public and seek justice and protect the rights of the accused, there's a lot of back and forth that people have opinions about. Well, cops need to be harder. You know how many times you've seen there's a case and, well, we just need to throw away the key on that guy, or we need to kill him or whatever. And there's a lot of passions that go on. But if at the end of the day we can come with a set of laws at the end of a session where we say, okay, we understand what our job is, we understand what these lines are, then we can work with that. And sometimes we get crazy ideas that come to the session. Most of them die, and then some of them don't. Well, to your point, I've really appreciated the partnership we've had between the leaders from the sheriffs and peace officers and the leaders from the county attorneys, because I'm not the most experienced guy, but I've done it a few times and I've had, lots of cases and trials, but I can't give you an intelligent opinion or a legislator an intelligent opinion about what a 5-year veteran of the sheriff's office is going to do in that situation. And so I really appreciate the partnership we've had where sheriffs and under sheriffs, you guys are on those calls and you're saying, here's the reality on the ground. My guys on a day-to-day basis need this to be able to do their job. So that's what I like, what you've provided and some of your fellow sheriffs have provided when we have those conversations.
It's a great learning process, and I always find the same. We'll say, hey, we think this is great, and then the county attorneys association will step in and say, well, yeah, it could be great, but this wording right here is going to create a problem for us, and like I said before, like with you and Josh Rackey, you guys are usually like this. If it's the will of the people, we respect it and we'll do it, but the arguments you guys usually make, you're not the no people. One of my big frustrations I've had, even with my own sheriff's association sometimes, is it's just no. Nope, we're not going to support it. That's not what we're, and I'm like, time out. My own comment is always like you said, I count the votes. And I'm like, well, it's going to pass. Mm. So which side of history do we want to be on here? Are we going to just say no? Or are we going to say, okay, I know it's going to pass. Now help us help you so it has some type of legacy that'll work. Okay. So the public's not mad at us, right?
That makes sense. And so you could have an idea that you're like, okay, this is going to pass. Let's make it better.
Right.
And then there's other voices sometimes that say, let's amend it and make it worse so it doesn't work, or it gets struck down by the court. Like let's intentionally pass a bad bill, inviting the courts to strike it down. That creates all kinds of second and third order effects.
Absolutely. Yeah. And money. It's our tax dollars at work that, and now you're pulling people from different levels of government involved in that suit. So they're, like your office, I'm sure at your office in Broadwater County, I'm sure your civil people do criminal and vice versa. Well, now they're all tied up in this. Yeah. So you can't work as many cases because you're hamstrung. And so I think about those things like the big picture, long term, moving forward. And I'm always like, okay, how do we deal with this? I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some principle, horrible things that get proposed out there that you just have to say no on principle.
Right.
But one of the things I've always admired about you is you're like, okay, listen, it's got the votes. We either can be part of this, be part of building this into something good, or we're kind of culpable by omission. Yeah.
So
if we don't.
So that leads me, we should talk about something else that we worked on together.
Yeah.
Do you remember a few years ago when there was this was before, so the current U.S. attorney in Montana is named Jesse Lazovich. Yep. Been a friend of mine for many years. I think so highly of him. Went to law school with him. He's a very good lawyer. He's a very good public servant. He's just a good man. I trust him a lot. Trust his common sense. So before he was nominated and confirmed, the acting U.S. attorney in Montana basically delivered a letter that came from the National Attorney General Merrick Garland about, and this was, I think, on the heels of COVID fights in closures of schools. And some parents had gone to a school board meeting and had argued against the school board. And I think the national DOJ decided, well, we're going to look at a way to prosecute unruly parents in school board meetings. And it was some kind of domestic terrorism law. And I remember when this came down, and it got sent to every county attorney. And I just read this. And actually, the first person who brought it up was Josh Rackey. And he said, well, what is this? This came from another planet. And I hadn't seen it yet. And he told me, you need to read this letter. So I read the letter. I thought, wow, this is pretty bad. So I ended up writing a letter to him saying, and I ended up getting published as an op-ed saying, no, this isn't how it works. Number one, generally when there's a case that is a federal or state case, feds can't take it unless the state decides not to prosecute it. So like I have a case that's a state or a federal case, and I just gave it to the feds, for example. But there's sometimes when you go, no, I want this case, I'm going to take this case. But the feds can't come in and prosecute parents at school boards without local authorization. And I said, don't try it in Broadwater County. It's not going to happen. I'm never going to let you do that because it was such an overreach. And then you and I went on the radio. I think, was it the Aaron Flint or was it whose show were we
it
on?
was Aaron Flint, but he had a guest. He had a guest host that day. But yes, that was what it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we talked about that. And you had an interesting statement on there that I hadn't thought about. And you said, remember that everything we do with the support and the permission of the people who elected us. And they will only tolerate the level of government intrusion in their lives that they think is appropriate. And some version of that. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting because we are about as close to the public as you can get. We're county elected officials versus someone from US DOJ who's never been to Montana, maybe never been to a school board meeting, right? And they're telling us, well, this situation applies where a domestic terrorism law might be invoked. So I appreciated you speaking out on that issue with me.
It was a huge overreach, and the kind of the synopsis of my statement is basically the people who are the boss will only allow the government to police them as much. Or you can only police them as much as they will allow.
Okay,
and people have forgotten that, and it surprises me they've forgotten that because if you look at what happened with Antifa and all that other stuff. And I'm not saying that was right, so that's not what I'm saying, but there's disorder all the time. And it's the public saying, okay, we're not tolerating this level of enforcement anymore. We're done. And some of it's appropriate, but most of it's inappropriate. Mm-hmm. And I felt that what you and I did was appropriate, appropriately civilly disobedient. If you will, I was like, hey, no, this is not cool. And one of the things I was excited about, at least in my community, is my county attorney, my chief of police, and myself all signed the letter that we sent.
That's right.
To the United States Attorney General. Yeah. Unified together as a team. Yeah. And we said, no, this is not going to happen here. And that was scary. I mean, I thought that was a huge overreach, and I just thought it was almost like we were incapable of handling that situation appropriately, and that was a little weird. But yeah, I was proud of you too. We and then we went on that show and did it and talked about why, and I thought you did a great job. I thought we were articulate. I thought we were to the point, and drove the point home, and in a way that wasn't non-supportive of our federal partners. Right. I don't have anything against our federal partners.
I love to work with them when the case is appropriate. I just don't think that's anywhere close to an appropriate case.
No, it was not. Yeah. It was absolutely not.
So one of the basic problems we have in this republic is how we ensure the government's working for the people in the way that it's designed. Now, so the genius of James Madison and the framers of the Constitution is the belief that some of our greatest threats would come from within if we allow a Napoleon basically to take over. So they designed a system of checks and balances with intentional friction between among the three branches, and then with a separation of authorities between the national and the state governments, federalism. So a lot of our friction, and I think we're seeing that in Montana right now, comes with either the friction between branches or a concern that a particular actor within the government is overplaying or overstepping their authority and their bounds. So I decided this fall to run for the Supreme Court in Montana because, I think there's a great need there. I think there's a good opportunity there there's two retiring incumbents, Chief Justice McGrath and then Justice Sandifer, who's actually from Great Falls. And so I decided to run for the chief job because I wanted to use a lot of my leadership experience to do some things there, and I'll talk about that more. But also because I have a concern that even in our discourse, certainly in the back and forth of reviewing legislation and in cases, there is a temptation right now to push the court to be too political and to overstep its role vis-a-vis the other branches. And I'm a big believer that in judicial restraint. I'm a big believer in textualism in terms of, A judge should rule on that case and examine whatever that statute or whatever it is based on the text of the case, not importing what they think should be there or what isn't there. And I really believe that if the court can demonstrate a commitment to that way of judging, taking personalities and politics out of the equation, I think that it will actually strengthen trust in the institution, and I think it will help alleviate some of this friction. Some of this friction is inherent, and it's just always going to be there. But right now, we're at a kind of a fever pitch of fighting among the branches that I think is unnecessary. And so my goal would be, if I get elected, to focus on the proper role of a judge and how to decide each case based on facts and law of that case, not based on whose name is on the pleading, who their lawyer is, or who the party is, and just remove some of that baggage and noise and get back to just good judging, and then hopefully influence my colleagues to do the same.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I've been extremely frustrated with the judicial branch of government for a long time. When I first started as my role as a law enforcement officer, and then even most of my time as a detective. And when you're a detective, your relationship with those judges is very close. Not as in your buddies,
Right.
but you're sitting with them all the time, swearing to search warrants. I mean, you're oftentimes in their house. I've had search warrants signed in the locker room of the Peak. I mean, just crazy things like that, right? Where it's a little bit intimate.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I a long time ago, and leading all up into most of my career as a detective, they were so non-political and impartial in my mind. And I really, really felt it. I mean, I really felt it. And there were judges that I thought, oh, okay, that they're left of center. And then when they got in office, I was like, no, they're not. And then, vice versa. I mean, all sorts of stuff where I couldn't pin them down, and I could not figure them out. So it made you measured as a law enforcement officer, because it was like this. It was like, okay, this is the MCA book. This is the policy manual, whatever other, procedures or whatever else you have. You follow those to the letter, because you can't predict what that judge is going to do.
Right.
And then the judge is going to make an honest and fair decision based upon all these things. Well, I can tell you now, it appears a lot more predictable to me. And it's just, that bothers me. It bothers me to know that, okay, well, I mean, we have conversations all the time. Well, if that goes before that judge, it's not going to fly. And then we're right. I mean, we predict it 9 times out of 10. And I used to be able to not predict it.
I see. Yeah, and I don't know your Great Falls judge as well. I think I know most of them, but I've never appeared in front of any of them. So,
but it's not just Great Falls judges, and I'm not speaking for all the Great Falls judges, but I'm just saying I've seen a lot more of that.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot more where it's like, and we shouldn't be able to predict what they're going to do. It should be something where you go in, it's all based on a lot of things that people don't understand about court, right? Is if it's not introduced in court as evidence,
it doesn't exist. Yeah.
It doesn't count.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, people know things. Like, you hear witnesses and victims all the time. Well, I said this and that. Well, it wasn't presented as evidence in court, so it's not going to be talked about.
Yeah.
But whatever's presented in front of them, they make rulings. Obviously, if it's a pretrial motion or a bench decision, then it's a bench. That's how it works, where a judge will decide. Or they'll make rulings to guide the jury through the process. But I agree with you, is I guess what I'm getting at. I just find it's becoming very predictable, which tells me the judicial branch is coming too political.
Mm. Yeah. So I do have a concern that, of course, the majority of the cases that I do are criminal law cases, right? And so when I get a case, so generally I do all the felonies in our office, and I have a deputy who does all the misdemeanors. We're a small office. And then I have another deputy that does civil work, and I do kind of a little bit of everything. But so when I get a felony case and I'm going through the investigation and I'm drafting the documents, I'm thinking about the jury trial. Like I'm literally thinking about my closing argument to the jury as I draft the case. And sometimes I'll get a weird or unusual charge, and I'll go look up the jury instructions before I file the case because I want to make sure I'm thinking correctly about it. And then a lot of times there's follow-up investigation and all that. I don't think about what judge is doing it because I don't know at that point. I don't know what the judge is assigned until I file the case. And I'm part of the district that has the Helena judges and the Townsend and Helena is the first district. And I like all of our judges, and I think they're all pretty well. Judge Abbott's knew us, but he's a very good lawyer, a very good judge, and I think they're all experienced. And so I just say, I'm going to put this in front of whatever judge I'm going to do. My concern is that may not be the case statewide. I mean, I think for the majority district court judges, they're going to be experienced lawyers. They're going to be they're not there to make more money than they would make in the private sector. Generally, if you have a good experienced litigator, they're going to make more than a judge.
Way more.
So we go in kind of like county attorneys. Like I could have left after my first term and made double the money in the private sector, but I wanted to stay and do what I was doing. And I think for the most part, that's where I think we are with district court judges. There's always exceptions to that. When we do the work, the spade work at the district court level, the pretrial hearings, the motions practice, the trials, the sentencing, the problem I'm seeing is I'm seeing some lack of predictability, and I think it's coming from some recent Supreme Court cases where sentencing, we're getting some novel sentencing rulings and opinions from the Supreme Court that we're having to now go back and redo things. We're getting, there was a recent case called State versus Noli, N-O-L-I.
Yes,
that
very familiar with that case.
Completely changed how we handle traffic stops that could turn into something else. And in that case in particular, I guess I'll just tell you my beef with that case. There are 7 members of the Supreme Court, and the court can decide if they're going to, all 7 will hear a case, or sometimes they'll refer it to 5. If it's not a 4-3 split, right? That case was 5 justices. They didn't have an oral argument. And the 2 justices who were off of that panel are Justice Rice and Justice Baker, who, if those 2 are on the same side on a case, they're right. You can just take it to the bank. And so those 2 were off the case. And so we had a 5-justice panel that, in my view, here's the holding of the case. They went way beyond it and rewrote a bunch of stuff that has created a lot of uncertainty in how law enforcement does their job procedurally, how prosecutors do their job, how district courts do their job. There's another case that I'm not going to talk about as much because I'm not as familiar with it, but it changed sentencing parameters and then there's another case that changes jury instructions on complicated sex cases. And those 3 cases in the last year, I think that half the prosecutors in the state don't really know what exactly they're supposed to do in those instances. And I think half the district judges don't know what they're supposed to do in certain circumstances. That kind of unpredictability is not only absolutely unnecessary. I think if the court had focused on the narrow holding that it needed to decide that case and move along, that wouldn't have happened. But secondly, what it means is your team may not be able to investigate an important drug case or a DUI case or a rape case successfully, and then it may come to a prosecutor who's going, well, the rules of the game have shifted. I'm not sure how we can actually bring this case all the way to a jury trial. That's troubling. And then it's really troubling when a district court has to figure out sentencing parameters going, I've actually heard a judge say this, well, whatever I do, it's going up to the Supreme Court and it's 50-50 chance it's coming back. Not because it wasn't a good judge, it was a very good district judge, but because that level of uncertainty had been injected into a Supreme Court practice of saying, here's the ruling, but we're going to go this far and shift the procedure. I'm banging your microphone.
That's all right.
So that's one of the concerns I have about the Supreme Court. And I don't think it's necessary. I think there's a better way to do it.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I mean, I can remember there's been, the Montana Supreme Court has been a rocky road for a long time. And now I'm at finally a stage in my career from being in detectives for 7 years and now being sheriff for 5 years. So the last 12 years, I've really gotten a front row seat to it. I had a terrible, terrible ruling on one of my cases. I mean, just awful ruling that allowed someone who beat a child to walk. And it was funny because the, what do you call it? When you disagree, your dissent.
The dissent.
The dissent by the two justices was like 3 times as long as the ruling was. And it was just, I've seen that a lot. And I've seen, I know people who have run for the Supreme Court who've made comments that it's become kind of a political entity. And that's not, whether that's true or not, and you would probably know better than I would, so I'm not gonna formulate a plan. I think I watch certain things and it feels that way. It does. And I read things and I ask opinions and I talk to lawyers and people who are smarter than I am about things. It does feel that way to me, that it's become kind of political. But a lot of people say that are running for it and doing different things. So that I struggle with that. And I think it's all going right back full circle to what you said to start. As if we can get the Montana Supreme Court on solid ground, it'll help everything in our justice system. Yeah. And I think that leadership angle that you're taking is appropriate.
Yeah. And I think we are talking about criminal law because that's what we do. Yeah. But it's anything. It's how to do a contract. It's how to do an insurance policy. It could be a car crash, civil suit, whatever it is. People want to just have some understanding and predictability that the law is what we think it is. And that's really where I'm going. The temptation to be political is ever present. I mean, it's like Absolutely. A tide that is constantly wanting to pull a court into political. Why? Because you have all these inherently political cases. There's just read the news on almost a daily basis. Whether it's complaint that someone's privatizing schools with the new charter school stuff. There might be environmental legislation. There might be the transgender care. There's all these issues that are inherently political. So I'm not saying, gosh, I don't understand how the court is inventing this political issue. They're inherently political.
Right.
The challenge is to have that level of discipline and commitment to the role of the judge to fend off the political influences and calls that are there all the time. And then here's where it gets even worse is court races tend to be affected greatly by outside spending. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at the Absolutely. Last, go back all the way to Carl LeGray and Terry Treeweiler, and the campaigns are raising a couple $100,000, or even if they're really lucky, $1 million, which is a lot in a Supreme Court race. But then the outside spending is 2-3 times that, and so that's part of the trouble. Is everyone's looking at these two candidates and going, oh, well, they must be Attila Hun versus, Michelangelo, because that's what the advertising is saying. And so that also tends to make, at least bring in a political influence into the race. And so it's challenging. But I would say candidates and members of the court have to be absolutely rock solid in saying, I'm going to resist the political overtones. I will, and I can tell you this as a guy who's practiced quite a bit. If I'm investigating or I'm prosecuting a crime, I don't care if they're Republican. I don't care if they're Democrat.
Absolutely not.
I have prosecuted people that contributed to my campaign as a county attorney. Mm-hmm. And it's like it has nothing to do with it. It has to do with my job, and I'm the only guy here in this tiny little county, and I can't. I can't call down the road and get someone else to come in and do it and say I have a conflict of interest just because
Absolutely.
Because I know, because you can't do that. I mean, literally we've had, it's same with, it's like picking a jury. I've had people on the jury that I coached baseball with them, and guess what? They voted against me. I had a jury trial we lost, and like 3 members of the jury were people that I knew pretty well, and they're like, hey, you didn't do a good enough job. Sorry, the evidence wasn't there.
You didn't bring it.
And I'm like, thank you for your integrity as a juror.
Yeah, absolutely.
It hurts, but I appreciate that you were willing to vote against me.
No, it's the same way for me. I don't care what political party you're in. If you got to go to jail, you're going to jail.
Yeah.
It doesn't really, we cannot be swayed by that.
Right.
We have to look at the facts. And I always break it down like this. You know, I agree with you. The temptation to be political is always there.
Yeah.
You will actually, and let's be real. You get something that comes before you and you go, oh, this is going to suck politically. And you say that to yourself because you know that there's going to be a backlash when you do the right thing. But you look at it and you say, okay, if this was anybody else, what would I do? And I need to make sure I do the same thing. And then you continue on and you do it. And that's what integrity is. You got to dig in deep and figure that out. So I'm so glad you brought that up. One of the other things that I wanted to bring up politicizing, especially in the judicial branch, is I always get really frustrated because you do see it. I mean, I think anybody who's watching this, and between you and I, we've seen politics in the judicial branch of government, all branches, but we're talking about the judiciary for this topic.
Right.
And it's kind of like the recent Supreme Court decision. Was it Justice Barrett ruled against the other justices for the border stuff? And
Was that an injunction?
Yeah, I believe
or a
so.
Stay ruling?
I
Okay.
believe so. It was the Texas razor wire thing.
Yeah, got it.
And I actually applauded her. I mean, I want us to secure the border. That's my personal belief. But I applauded her because she said, if we go down this road and another president in the executive branch gets in office, we just set a precedent about how they can secure their own border. And I always think about that when I think about people who want to politicize something is, okay, go ahead and do that. But what happens when the other, whatever political party you want to call it, the opposite party is in charge? Did you just set a precedent that they get to do what you did?
Yeah.
And you did.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And that's like the one thing that I wish people would just take a little bit of caution with when they go down this road. And let's face it, the legislative branch, right? We're always looking at the House and the Senate and how they're split. We're counting votes, right? How is this bill going to pass? Well, this bill's going to pass because look at the votes, that type of thing. Very political as individual representatives. Executive branch probably is a little less political, but I think that political issue becomes a little bit more obvious, I would say. But it should hit the judicial branch and stop cold. It should be like, okay.
Yeah.
And they're kind of the final check and balance of our justice system that should be like, okay, you know, we've sifted through the legislative branch. We've sifted through the executive branch on this.
Yeah.
We got all the politics out. This is the decision. Here we go. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the concern is there are folks who want to make it more political. Like
Absolutely.
I'm saying, you know, I'm people, if they look at all my biography, they'll see I worked for Republicans and I've been involved in politics, less so in the last 10 years because, you know, you get kind of become a slave to your prosecution job. But from my point of view, I'm saying I don't care if you're Republican, I don't care if you're Democrat, you are not going to get a special advantage or disadvantage when you come into a courtroom. I prosecuted a prominent Republican because it was the right thing to do. I had 2 environmental cases where I sued civil cases to enforce environmental laws in Broadwater County because they were being violated, and to the point where I was like, people are calling me up and calling me a greenie, and I'm like, had to do it. I mean, they were blatant violations,
Right.
and I was proud to enforce the law, and both of them we ended up with really good outcomes, good cleanups. But it wasn't this crusading environmental attorney. And so it was kind of this thing where people were giving me a hard time because they knew I had worked for.
But that's the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do. It was the right answer. I had to do it. Yeah, you can't sit back and pick and choose.
Absolutely. And I tell people all the time, I mean, most people know I'm very conservative, but I tell people all the time, there's a ton of liberal issues that I believe in. And there's a ton of the stuff that if I have to deal with it and it slants that way in my job, I'm like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. I get it. This is what we got to do. It's simple stuff.
Yeah.
Whether you're into getting fit or staying fit or just having fun with the family, join the Peak Health and Wellness Center today. With 2 great locations in Great Falls, they're here to serve you. If you like weightlifting, functional fitness, or enjoy a wide selection of cardio equipment, the Peak has everything you need. They also offer classes for all ages and fitness levels. The Peak even has a daycare for those busy parents out there. Go check out the Peak today. The Double Barrel Cafe is all about you, the amazing people of Cascade County. With every purchase you make, they give back to our community. Every bite and sip fuels their mission. Let's make a positive change, 1 cup and 1 bite at a time, because the Double Barrel is not just a cafe, they're building a better community. If you haven't noticed lately, Cascade County is booming, and the choice for all your construction needs is Builders First Source. They even have an automated home builders solution for all of your construction needs. Go to 826 Northwest Bypass in Great Falls and check them out today. Are you looking to replace those floors in your home? Or maybe you're doing new construction? The place I trust is Contract Flooring Carpet One. This is a locally owned and operated business here in Great Falls, and they are committed to serving you and giving you the very best prices and the very best product and service. Go see Contract Flooring Carpet One today. You'll be floored. If you love a farm-to-table experience as much as I do, then you have to go to the Roadhouse Diner. The local McCafferty Ranch beef served on every burger. Try my personal favorite, Death by Bacon, today. Central Avenue Meats gets their beef and pork exclusively from a local producer, McCafferty Ranch. Go see them at 422 Central Avenue in Great Falls, and always support your local rancher. When deciding who I would trust for the technology component of this podcast, the choice was simple: Information Systems in Montana. Whether purchasing products for business or when I had them build me a new MacBook to catch child predators, they delivered, creating a solution for my exact needs. Contact Information Systems in Montana today. Everybody needs a good insurance plan. Whether it's for home or auto insurance, check out Heinbaugh Agency. Eric Heinbaugh is a local agent focused only on customer service, not sales. If you're passionate about firearms and the Second Amendment like I am, one of the best places in all of Montana to go is Mitchell Supply. Jim and Tammy Mitchell have been running this gun store for decades. They're major supporters of the Second Amendment, and they're major supporters of our community. And obviously, they're supporters of this podcast. For all your firearms needs, go check out Mitchell Supply today. I think one of the huge challenges right now is everything is upside down in our world. And so that's making the political crosshairs, they're jumping all over the place. Mm-hmm. And what, I mean, it's funny because, like, I mean, the Democrats used to be like, you know, anti-big pharma, anti-war, you know, anti-military industrial complex, you know, and I'm talking about this on a high level just to kind of synopsis it. And now it's all reversed.
Yeah.
It's all completely reversed. And so that's another challenge in this environment when you're in it and you're dealing with the law and you're dealing with the different branches of government is it's the target's moving all the time.
Yeah.
And you just have to have the integrity to read it, interpret it, and move, and not worry about where the target is today, because it will come back tomorrow.
Yeah, that gate will swing the other way, won't it?
It will.
Yeah. And that'd be the mark of a good judge, a judge who rules in a way that's contrary to their personal belief or preference.
Absolutely.
Because the law led them to that, right? So that's, and I just tell you my, I guess I want to finish on a thing that we just briefly touched on. So before I'm trying not to criticize the court. I'm trying to say, here's my philosophy of, I think,
Absolutely.
what would make the court better.
Absolutely.
I will tell you a couple things the court's done really well in the last few years, probably really under Chief Justice McGrath. Years ago, when I was in law school and when I was newly practicing as an attorney, it took forever to get opinions out of the court. I mean, it would be a year. I've seen longer than that. And it was frustrating to everybody because justice delayed is justice denied sometimes. And the court's done a very good job of getting a lot more efficient, getting opinions done quicker. Some of the things we talked about, the going down to 5 justices. I think there's some trade-offs there. I think the people are becoming a little more disconnected from the court because there's a lot fewer oral arguments. Oral arguments are a great chance, whether you do it in Helena at the court, or they used to they'd go to MSU, or they'd go to U of M, or they'd go to somewhere and do a big high-profile case, and you could have 300 people in the audience watching it. Those kinds of things I think are really good to get the court out there, and people can see that they're not these shadowy figures behind a curtain, but they're real human beings. So, but I think the other problem, and I think the focus that I want to bring is we can't get obsessed with the political fights about the court. So the Exhibit A, the thing that's on everyone's mind but isn't being talked about, is the 2021 fight between the legislature, the attorney general, and the court.
Absolutely.
Well, I suspect by the time this year's over and the election happens, whoever wins these races and takes office, I think those things are going to be resolved. I think Knutson's thing will be resolved this year. So for me, I'm not focused on let's rehash and refight and relitigate what happened in 2021. But what I do want to say is, how do we get better?
Yeah.
How do we get better? A Chief Justice's job is to help lead the entire judicial branch, the Supreme Court, all the district courts, the administration process, work with the state bar on regulation of practice of law, all those things. How do we get better as an organization? Now, there's many people that are complaining and saying, if you dare criticize the court or you suggest they need to get better, that you're siding with the Neanderthals or whatever. I'm not talking about that fight. I'm talking about, as an organization, how do we get better? Because because you take 3 people of any walk of life and you put them together, you automatically have a team. And you either have
Absolutely.
a team that works well together, or you have a team that doesn't work well together.
Yeah.
And so of those 3 people, one of them has to be the leader and lead that team in the better direction. And so a lot of my military background, which we haven't talked about much, I've very much committed to, I've kind of developed a leadership philosophy of how I want to lead any organization that I'm a part of to be better, to be more committed to teamwork, to learning from our mistakes, to caring for the individuals, actually caring for them, and about how to produce the outcomes that whoever your customer is, they're expecting you to not only get it right, but hopefully get it right on time. And so that's the leadership component that I'm going to start talking about more, and that I really want to bring to this position, because I think the court, in a lot of those administrative ways, has done better than 15 years ago, but there's so much more we can do.
I agree. I think there is a sense, though, that you don't dare ever criticize someone who wears a robe. There's very much a sense from that, and that's not just coming from judges. That's coming from, whatever opposite opinion you're being critical of.
Okay.
Don't criticize the judge. They're the judge. They're this. And I'm like, they're still an elected official. They're still elected by the people to represent the people. They don't have a special power. The robe does not make them. The problem is, and I don't know how to address this issue, but I believe in the judicial branch of government there's a lack of competition. So if I don't do very well as sheriff, I'm going to have competition. Somebody's going to file and run against me and push me.
Or even if you are the best sheriff, you're still going to have someone that's irritated and they're going to run. So,
or somebody who just I think sheriff's actually a really good job. And I think there's somebody out there who just says, I want that job. You know what I mean? It's like, well, that sounds like something I want to do. Mm-hmm. So they don't always, you're smart to run if there's an issue.
Yeah.
That's always a smart thing.
That's
a little political 101. Probably shouldn't run against somebody if there's not an issue, because it's hard to beat an incumbent.
Yeah.
But if there is an issue and you really want the job, you should go for it. And you talked about this earlier, and I know I've had friends that are judges, and it's like they maybe make 1/6 to 1/7 typically, depending upon what firm they came from when they go run for judge. the ones who go from being like a county prosecutor to a judge,
Yeah, it's a step up for me.
It's a little step up, it's not huge, but it's a step up, right? And so what I'm seeing is there's not a lot of competition at the judicial level. I mean, a lot of these, most of them are on the ballot and they're unopposed year after year after year after year. It's like when you made a joke, it can become a sentence.
Life sentence, yeah.
But that's not healthy for our community.
Yeah.
That's not healthy.
Yeah.
And it's weird because if you go down, let's say you go down to legislative, I mean, every legislative race is contested, and they got to run every 2 years, those poor people, right? And it's a part-time job and it's a total servitude job.
Yeah, because you get there and it's 4 months of torture. You're like, wow.
And 4 months away from whatever business or job that they have to take a leave of absence away from where they probably make decent money.
Yeah.
So then you get into the executive branch, and I think the executive branch has the most competition, and you can make an okay living doing it. So I think that's where the executive branch gets the best bang for the buck, so to speak, for branches. But you get up to the judicial branch, and I mean, maybe if there's an open seat, there's competition. But once that seat is filled, there's no competition typically.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't know if there's a way. I mean, we don't want to raise everybody's taxes and start paying them equivalent to private sector attorneys. That would be unbelievably high.
Right.
But coming up with some creative way that creates some type of competition, I think would fix a lot of this. Because some of it is, well, I'll say this. A lot of things about the judicial branch are not reality. They're perception. But in our world, it can become your reality quickly. But I think if you'd have competition, you could literally cut through a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that's quite, that conundrum also goes to the nature of some of this whole issue, right? Because if you start, first of all, with the U.S. Constitution, someone's elected as appointed by the president as an Article III judge, and they're confirmed by the Senate. They have a lifetime appointment. The goal there is to have judicial independence, so you are not beholden on whoever the political master is for reappointment on a regular basis, and so that's the goal. Statewide for us, we have a little bit of that because the terms are long. I mean, a district judge's term is, I think, 6 years.
6 years.
Supreme Court justice is 8 years. So you've got 8 years of work, without constantly looking over your shoulder and having to run. But then you have to either run for reelection or whether even if you're unopposed, you have to be on the ballot for people to say yes or no. The interesting thing is, like, who becomes district court judges? They're going to be, I think they're going to be people that have a bit of experience as a litigator. Someone like me. I've been county attorney. I'm in my 10th year, and before that I did federal and state litigation. Or they're going to be somebody who maybe made a bunch of money, made some millions as a litigator, and they're like, oh, I've made enough money now. I'm going to go on the bench because I'm tired of the judges that I've been in front of. I don't think they're smart or whatever. And I'm sure there's other categories. One of the barriers actually is that the Montana Constitution. Well, I don't know if it's a barrier, but it says that if you are in a judicial job, you can't run for a non-judicial job. You immediately forfeit your office. So let's say somebody wants to be a judge for a term or two, and then they're like, I want to run for the legislature. I want to run for, I don't know, attorney general. They actually have to resign their job to run. So I don't know if that affects some people in terms of saying, if I go into the judiciary, I'm there forever. Like, right. I kind of assume if I get elected, that's probably what I'm going to do for the rest of my career. The other thing is the personalities of who wants to be judge. Like, most judicial candidates that I know don't like to campaign because they're like, I want to be a lawyer. I want to preside over trials. I want to write opinions. I want to be, completely immersed in being a judge. I don't want to be a politician, and I don't want to run. And so I think there's a certain amount of we're just not getting candidates that really want to fight to be a district court judge or to be a Supreme Court, which isn't quite true. Most Supreme Court races are contested, but not all of them. But I think somehow the attributes of the job kind of deselect candidates.
They do. No, I totally. That's really astute how you break all that down. And you're right. At the federal level, they're appointed for life. I always think though that like the purest form of government is local government. I mean, because we're in direct connection with the people, and I don't like the federal system in a lot of ways because it is some of the thing you're appointed by. I mean, let's face it. We all know like. You know, who Trump's appointees are versus who Obama's were. I mean, you pick them out, and then when they make decisions, it's almost like if that president were still in office. And so it then lends to be very political. I mean, how many times do we see, especially at the United States Supreme Court or at the Ninth Circuit, every once in a while, those ones, the appellate ones, surprise you. They really do. I mean, and I do think that's still a level of some really pure, you know, an honest reading of stuff. But we laugh. I mean, a lot of these decisions, when they go to the United States Supreme Court, you're like, okay, well, that's a 6-3. That's a you just kind of write them out like you know what they are.
There's this full industry of analyzing the 9 up there and trying to figure out how they're going to vote on different things. I shouldn't say vote. I don't view it as voting. I view it as ruling.
Ruling, yes.
But yeah, same deal.
But that's the frustration that I think like small people like me see. And I'm like, and there is a sense, and I'll just be really frank, there is a sense like there's a kind of a skull and bones hierarchy to it where, you know, there's these trial lawyers who are behind the scenes and they're like, hey, you know, Joe, do you want to be judge? Yeah, I do.
Are you talking about Montana?
Yeah,
or
I mean,
okay,
in all levels, any level of judiciary, it just feels like that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's your turn. Okay, all right, cool. And I'll go do my time. I'll go do my time on the bench, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe it's because they made $1 gajillion and they have money now, so the power of being a judge is what's appealing to them. And so that's what they go and do. And I'm saying all this because I was really excited when I heard you were running because you're very much not that person. You're very a fresh face to this whole thing. I kind of in a way, and I don't mean this negative towards you, but I view you kind of like as an outsider coming into this. And how I mean that is like, I could think of 100 other people that would run for the chief of the Supreme Court that I know who are deeply involved in everything having to do with lawyers and the law. And I'm like, oh yeah, that person. Yeah, I totally predict that person. And then all of a sudden you jump in and I'm going, oh, wait a second. You're different. You're just different because I know you care about all the things that you've already said so deeply. And to kind of jump on that, I want to jump back real quick. So I kind of want everyone to kind of know, like, where'd you grow up?
Okay. Yeah. Well, and before I do say that, I tend to be a little more, and I might be naive, I don't know, but I tend to think that most of the people that go on the court are doing it because they want to do, whether it's the Supreme Court or district court, they want to do justice and they want to do the very best.
I totally agree.
I think there is an issue of differences of opinions about the role of the judge. And that's my concern. My concern is I think the role of the judge is not to be an activist. I don't care if you're a liberal activist or you're a conservative activist. I think that's bad for the court. I think it's bad for the workings and functionings of our republic.
It is.
But I don't generally think that there's people that, I'm sure there is. I'm sure back in the days of Anaconda Copper, there were judges who were bought and paid for. But I'm not as concerned about that now. I am concerned about a stark difference in our philosophy. And I believe activism is the mark of a bad court. And ultimately, it's going to lead to much more discontent and friction from the people and from the other political branches. So
I agree. No, I totally agree. So let's talk real quick.
Bookend on that. Let's go back.
I got other legal questions, but I got those at the end because I want to wrap up with. I got a good one for you. So
okay, can't wait.
Let's. You probably already predicted what it is. So let's go. I want to know. So where'd you grow up?
So I was born up in northern Montana. So my family, I'm the number 5 of 6 kids, and we lived up in northern Montana. We were poor. My parents were hardworking up in the Sunburst, Shelby, Cut Bank area. So when I was born, I was actually, and this is like this thing that's just never gotten over. It hurts deep inside. My parents lived in Sunburst, so I was actually born in Milk River, Alberta.
Oh, really?
In Canada, and I broke out of that hospital and get back to the USA as fast as I could. I don't know if it wasn't quite the same thing of the border crossings thing, but I snuck under the fence, and my parents didn't even know where I was. They got home, and I was already there eating Thanksgiving dinner. I was born on Thanksgiving, 1976, and I'm like, I can't believe you had me born in a socialist country. But once we got over that, we had a happy childhood.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So we lived up in the High Line. My parents were involved. My dad had construction business, and then we were involved in a lot of small church ministry along the High Line.
Is that why your brother Nate is always doing a home project?
Oh yeah, never ending. Never. You should do a before and after photo of his house. Have you seen his house?
A little bit, but I mean, I'm just laughing because the entire time I've known the guy, like something's been under construction.
He is always working on something, never ending working on something.
Yeah, he is a hardworking man. He is, and he's very creative. Like,
yes, he is.
My view of a house is a box to sleep in. And his idea of the house is, well, we could do this over here, and this alcove, and this window, and this little nook, and I'm like, oh, I could never build this. So.
His wife seems to enjoy it all, though. She seems to enjoy everything he's messing with, too.
She's very adventurous, I will say that. She's like,
or patient.
Very patient. And patient. So yeah, we did a lot of hard work growing up. And my dad was a strict guy, loving, just unconditional love, but we worked hard, and it was a great life. And then he ended up going back to finishing his career full time with the Montana Army National Guard. So he got transferred to Bozeman. So I went to high school in Manhattan, graduated from there. And then I did a year at MSU, and then I really had done debate in high school, and I liked it. And Carroll College has like this perennial championship debate team, and so I ended up transferring to Carroll so I could do the debate team, and awesome. Did that. We had a incredible collection of kids and talent and coaches, and so we were national champions my junior year in debate. And I mean, when I say that, I mean all colleges and universities in the country. Second place was Colorado State University, and I think third was Berkeley. So tiny little Carroll College, we beat them all in debate. And somewhere along the way, I joined the National Guard because I wanted to do something tough and challenging. And so I joined the infantry, and I shipped off to Fort Benning, Georgia. And like I said, I was prepared for that experience because I had grown up in a home of
How old were you when you joined the Army?
I was 20.
Oh,
so
you?
I had,
Okay.
I didn't join immediately out of high school. I joined after my second year of college. And so enjoyed that. We get the hard work and discipline that I had grown up with. They didn't give me the unconditional love.
So you joined enlisted then?
Yeah,
Okay.
I joined enlisted. Yep.
Awesome.
And then I was actually in the unit in Great Falls. It used to be Delta Company, 163rd Infantry here, Bradley's Mechanized Infantry. So I was a dismounted infantryman in a squad. And then I ended up going to officer candidate school. And the entire summer of 1998, I was in officer candidate school at Fort Carson and then down in Fort Benning again. I finished in Fort Benning, Georgia. And finished college and took a year to do some more Army training. I worked at the Montana legislature, and then I started law school, and I was in a morning class on a Tuesday morning, and someone came and knocked on our door and said, we're under attack.
Yeah.
We went out and canceled classes and watched all day the September 11th terrorist attack.
Yeah.
And honestly, I knew that day I was going somewhere.
Oh, absolutely.
I was like, I know I'm going somewhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So where'd you go?
So I didn't go right away. I tried to, and I kept volunteering, trying to get in units that were going, and it just doesn't work out that way in the National Guard.
What rank are you at this time?
I was probably a second lieutenant, and then I might have been a first lieutenant by then. First lieutenant. So
Okay.
then right after I graduated in 2004, May of 2004. So then June I shipped out with the 163rd Infantry, back with them. I was a captain now. And we went to Fort Bliss, Texas, and did a long train up, and then we went over to Iraq at the end of '04. And so I was what's called the battle captain, which is the most horrible job in the world. You're in this battalion operations center with all the radios and the maps, and you're communicating with all the missions. And you got a fires desk here that runs the artillery, and you got this next office over is the intel section. And so I shouldn't say it was the worst. It was a horrible job. I was involved in every single aspect of everything we did from one end to the other.
Wow.
For a battalion of infantry that owned a piece of Iraq. But it's very stressful, and the only way I could get out on a patrol is I had to convince one of my friends to take over for a day so I could sneak out, or I would go out on a night patrol and miss sleep. And so you would do that from time to time, but most of the time you are literally anchored there. So we got there at the end of '04, and the first election was January 30th, 2005. So that whole month leading up to it was very violent. And we were in an area that was kind of the edge of the Sunni Arab area. North of us was Kirkuk, the Kurdish area. So we were on this fault line where the Sunnis and Kurds were always fighting with each other. And so that was a very violent time. And then we were there all of '05 until the second election, which was October 15th, 2005. So the second one was like the regional parliamentary election, or the first one was the parliamentary, and I think the second one was the regional governors. I don't recall exactly. And as we got farther and farther toward the end of '05, things were getting worse. Because if you recall, '06, '07, things were at a point where Iraq was in basically a full-scale civil war. And then in, I think, end of '06 was when George Bush announced the surge, and then he appointed General Petraeus, and then 7, 8 were just all the things that they did to really bring about a total change in that country. So I got home November of '05, and then I just kind of sat in my house for a month and didn't talk to anybody. And then I studied, and somehow miraculously I passed the bar exam in February.
Wow.
I was I got back and I'm like, I don't remember anything.
Oh,
so I just bought the books and I just studied.
Start
and studied.
over?
Yeah. I just studied.
What was that experience like in Iraq for you? Was that tough?
It was tough. It was, so I had, it was tough, but it was not destroying of me. You know what I mean? Everything that had happened to me in my life, and certainly how I was raised, I had prepared myself mentally and physically and spiritually to go do that. My older brother was with us. He was our battalion medical officer. He was a PA. My brother-in-law was with us, but his unit actually got transferred to a different spot, so I only saw him a couple times that year. And then actually when we deployed, my dad was deployed in Bosnia in command of a unit at Sarajevo. So
Really?
yeah, think about
Wow.
my poor mom.
No
four
kidding.
of us are gone at the same time overseas. So
Jeez.
it was heartbreaking. We had soldiers killed, and it was hard.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that I struggled with, and I've spoken about this publicly at a prayer breakfast, but by the end of that year, I was pretty hard and burned up like everybody was. And I really struggled with how to be a good soldier and be a Christian.
Right.
And because you get to this point where you hate your enemy. And
Yeah.
so that was very much the spiritual battle that was going on inside my heart that difficult year.
Yeah, it is tough. I mean, there's mindset that you have to have that is supposed to survive. That's how you survive.
Yeah.
And then the question is how do you shut it off at a certain point?
Yeah.
But there's a point in time where you have to have a mindset. You have to.
Yeah. You got to do the job.
Yeah, you got to do the job, and you got to stay alive. Or in your case, you not only have to stay alive, you have to keep people alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can't cloud those decisions. That's challenging.
I remember one day, it was near the end, and our guys were out on a joint patrol with an Iraqi unit, and they came under fire, and I think there was an IED that detonated. And the first call that came in and reported 5 wounded and 3 KIA. And I was just like, oh. And so we called back and I said, are they U.S. or are they Iraqi? And then the call came back and said, all the casualties are Iraqi. And I said, oh, thank God.
Right.
And then I felt bad for saying that.
Yeah.
Because I valued our lives more than theirs.
Yeah.
Because those were my guys. And I don't apologize for that, because as a leader, that's what you have to do. Mm-hmm. But as a human being, it's a mirror that you don't like to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that, and I can say if I was in that situation, I probably would have the same reaction.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a normal reaction. It's kind of, it's like when your kids are out doing something and someone says, "Oh my gosh, one of the kids is hurt."
Yeah.
First thing you ask is it my kid?
Right.
And then you calm down when you find out it's not yours, and then you feel bad. I mean, there's a lot of similarities in that, and I think that's very, very normal. But that's I appreciate you sharing that, because I don't think a lot of people understand how difficult that would be. Well,
it's a very honorable opinion to hold too.
Absolutely.
It's not just, yes, you can carry that inside, but sharing that's a big deal. Because, all of us would be like, hey, it's our guys, we're all good. But no, you're thinking above and beyond that. That's looking through God's eyes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And that's how it should be.
So my brother was with our PA, as I mentioned, and just gave his heart, just caring for a lot of soldiers, and had some hard days when people were killed. And I remember one day in the summer, I can't remember why I was free, because I usually was working all the time. I went over to the battalion aid station, and he was there, and I was visiting with him. And a local man, an Iraqi man from the nearby village, came in. They brought him in. You have to be given permission and escorted to come on the base. And he came in, and he had a little boy that was probably 4 or 5 with him. And he couldn't get a doctor where he was. And so the little boy I think he had like an infected foot or something. And I remember, so John sat him up on this. Sorry.
It's okay.
It's not good to talk about this. I always get emotional.
It's okay.
He sat him up on this gurney, and he treated the boy, and just gave him some disinfectant, gave the father some medicine, and I think an interpreter came in, so gave him instructions. And I was at that point of burned out, I hate Arab men. Mm-hmm. That's where I was. And I looked at this father, and he just was looking down at his son was looking at him, and it was that same father look of love for his 4-year-old boy that you would see anywhere, including in my own family. And I just thought, they're human beings.
Yeah.
And my brother, who was also close to that point of burned out from that I was at, he was so tender and kind and caring to that little boy. I was very proud of him.
Yeah, I would be too.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand, though, like, the things that you're talking about are so normal.
Yeah.
They're so normal.
Yeah.
And even in law enforcement officers get jaded, because we're not at war, but we're dealing with the same, 1% of the population over and over again. So you start to get that jaded attitude about everything. And I think it's really cool that you share that, because I think if people just don't understand that that's what happens. And even if you never intended it to happen, did you have children of your own at the time?
No, I was single. That's why I graduated from school. I was single and I was broke.
Okay.
So I'm like, let's go, and so it was easy for me. We were gone 17 months. I shouldn't say easy. It was easier for me.
Right.
My brother had 2 little girls at home. It was very hard for him.
Yeah.
So people that had families, it was tough. I mean, that's a big chunk of their lives to miss.
I also find too that and I'm sure you can relate to this too, was once you become a parent, your whole outlook on the world changes.
Yeah, very much.
And it's harder. And the other thing it's harder to have mindset for certain things.
Yeah.
Because you just think it totally changes the way your universe looks.
Yeah. So. And so later I did 2 more deployments, and both of those we were married and had kids. We have 2 kids, and so the first one I left in September of 2010, and so my kids were both in diapers. My poor wife was I was gone almost exactly a year. I left on September 17th and I got back on September 11th. And I left on September 16th and got back on September 11th. And so I missed that whole year of that. You know, when they're that little, a year is a lot. I mean, they grow like crazy.
Yeah.
And then I was gone in 2022. So I had commanded the 163rd Combined Arms Battalion prior, and then in 2017, 2018, and then, or I guess 2016, 2018. And then they were going again. So I had already done it. I was a has-been. I was not driving a tank anymore. I was driving a desk, at the state headquarters. And the battalion was deploying, and their commander could not finish the deployment. He had to come out, and they were in Texas at their mobilization station, and they were literally flying out, like within a week, actually within a couple of days to Kuwait. And I got called and said, "You got to go." I'm like, "All right, I'm going." So I got a call. Actually, I got the call right before Christmas of 21, and it was for sure. I think that maybe December 28th, it was for sure. I can't recall exactly. And so then I flew out on January 21st.
I remember that.
And so now my kids are older. They're in junior high school. They're in activities, and so a year of their lives while I was away because we got back in.
I remember it too because it was an election year for you.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
and so I hear about it. And someone's like, "Hey, did you hear?" Because you're a colonel then, right? No, you're colonel now.
I was a lieutenant colonel.
Lieutenant colonel.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Colonel Swanson's gonna get the. And I'm like, did he give up his job? Like, no, Josh told me like they came up with some way for you to file or take your business.
Yeah, so it was my re-election year. So I was elected in 2014, 2018, no one even filed against me. So 22, no one files against me. So I filed my paperwork and I don't recall when. So I filed it whatever the first day was in January. And then I thought, I think I'm going, I'm not sure. And then it became for sure like the next week. And I'm like, crap. So what am I going to do? So I went and met with them, and I said, well, I'm in my reelection year. I'm willing to just give that up. I'll just get a different job when I get home. And they looked it up, and the regulations said that you could run if you were going to be on active duty fewer than 270 days. And they said, oh yeah, you'll be back long before that. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to do it then. So I get over there, and they're like, oh, yeah, we got extended.
Oh, jeez.
Which is how it is. Like every unit ever, we got extended. So I get over there, and like, oh, no, we got extended. So it was going to be like 285 days by the time I got home. And so I'm over the 270. So I applied. There was an exception in the regulation that said you can still be a candidate. You can't actively campaign, which I wasn't anyway. I was in the Middle East.
How were you going to do it?
You can't actively campaign, but you can have your name on the ballot if you get permission from the Secretary of the Army. So I apply through both the division commander who was over there as well as at home through the Adjutant General. And we hear nothing. And I'm kind of going, oh, man, at some point, this isn't going to work, I need to get out of the way so someone else can run. And so I set a deadline of sometime in June so that someone could apply and prior to them printing the ballots, because you got to send the ballots out, or it's not November. You got a backwards plan for absentee and all that. So I said, all right, I've got to pick a day in June, whatever it was, middle of June, and that's my day of either go forward or get out of the way. And so I was telling a friend of mine, I texted or emailed a friend of mine at home, and he said, well, have you heard an answer? And I said, no, I haven't heard an answer. It's been 3 months. And so he said, well, you need to ask Senator Daines. And I'm like, I don't want to bother them. He's like, no, just ask him. So I contacted someone on his staff and sent him the basic info. And I said, I'm not asking for a yes or a no. I just need an answer. I need an answer. Yeah. If I don't get an answer, the answer is no. And so they said, well, we can't guarantee you a result, but we will ask them to at least give you a timely response. And I told everyone in all my paperwork, this is the day, sometime in June, I can't remember now. That day in June, I got an email from the Office of the Secretary of the Army that said, do not resign, the secretary has approved your application. The paperwork will come next week. And it did. So I was literally probably 4 hours away from, I resigned from as a county attorney and find someone else to run.
Has this ever happened before? Like, I mean, I've never heard of it.
Never happened to me before.
Well, I mean, like in Montana, I mean, I've been around Montana politics and elected officials for a long time, and I just don't remember anything like that ever happened. It's a cool story.
I think it was. It's not. There aren't a lot of military members that are also elected officials. And I've always worked really hard to keep those separate. Like I don't want to talk about. In fact, even if I have an opinion, I really don't want to talk about foreign policy and the president and all that stuff, because I just don't want there to be a crossing of political lines. The race I'm running for is not
related.
It's not political, so I feel like I can do that.
So is the reason you couldn't, and I guess what, you'd campaign virtually, like, you know,
I didn't campaign at all.
No, but I mean,
just
but if you couldn't, because they told you could, is that Hatch Act? Is that why? Because you're then active?
I don't think Hatch Act applies to DOD. Or at least military, it may apply to DOD civilians. But there is an Army regulation that's on political activity.
So you couldn't,
Yeah,
so
and I was on Title 10. I was on Title 10 active duty.
Because I was just laughing. I don't know how you do it anyway. I mean, Facebook Live videos from the Middle East.
Yeah, I don't know.
That people would be like, why is he in the desert? They wouldn't even understand.
Yeah.
No, but that's kind of a unique story, though. Thanks for sharing that. I was curious how you navigated that.
Yeah, it was. I did not know how it was going to turn out. Yeah. I pretty much thought I'm going to have to get a different job when I get home. So, which isn't the end of the world, but
that's a great story.
Glad it worked out.
That's a great story. So you talk about you've got how many? So you're one of 6.
Yep.
All brothers?
No, so there's 3 boys and 3 girls.
3 boys and 2 girls.
Yeah.
Okay.
So our oldest brother lives in Billings.
Okay.
John, and then I have 3 sisters in a row. So 2 of them live here, actually in Great Falls, and then my oldest sister lives in Helena.
Oh wow.
And then Nathan is younger than me, and he lives in Great Falls. Yes. There's like 3 people on earth that call him Nathan. I'm one of them. So
I just love that guy. He's awesome. He does a great job.
Yeah, he's just a ball of fire. Like people think I don't know, high energy. I mean, like I'm like asleep on the couch compared to him.
Oh yeah, he's amazing. I remember when he was the, I guess, what would you call it, associate pastor?
Probably.
You know, so I guess that's what they call him. And I remember he would do guest stuff, and I remember thinking, I'm like, man, I hope that guy becomes a pastor, because every time he does one, I relate. And
and he was preaching? Yeah.
Yeah, and he does a great job. He does fun. Great leader. That must come naturally in your family.
Well, I think he's better than me. I've decided my philosophy of life. Are you ready for it?
Yes.
Selective laziness.
Okay. Oh, I like that. Okay, explain a little more. Give a little more background.
It's kind of another way of saying is accepting risk where you can, right? Because nobody can be good at everything all the time. You have to decide where you're going to focus your priorities and your efforts. And kind of when I'm being self-deprecating, I say it's selective laziness.
Whether you're into getting fit or staying fit or just having fun with the family, join the Peak Health and Wellness Center today. With 2 great locations in Great Falls, they're here to serve you. If you like weightlifting, functional fitness, or enjoy a wide selection of cardio equipment, the Peak has everything you need. They also offer classes for all ages and fitness levels. The Peak even has a daycare for those busy parents out there. Go check out the Peak today. The Double Barrel Cafe is all about you, the amazing people of Cascade County. With every purchase you make, they give back to our community. Every bite and sip fuels their mission. Let's make a positive change, 1 cup and 1 bite at a time, because the Double Barrel is not just a cafe, they're building a better community. If you haven't noticed lately, Cascade County is booming, and the choice for all your construction needs is Builders First Source. They even have an automated home builders solution for all of your construction needs. Go to 826 Northwest Bypass in Great Falls and check them out today. Are you looking to replace those floors in your home? Or maybe you're doing new construction? The place I trust is Contract Flooring Carpet One. This is a locally owned and operated business here in Great Falls, and they are committed to serving you and giving you the very best prices and the very best product and service. Go see Contract Flooring Carpet One today. You'll be floored. If you love a farm-to-table experience as much as I do, then you have to go to the Roadhouse Diner. The local McCafferty Ranch beef served on every burger. Try my personal favorite, Death by Bacon, today. Central Avenue Meats gets their beef and pork exclusively from a local producer, McCafferty Ranch. Go see them at 422 Central Avenue in Great Falls, and always support your local rancher. When deciding who I would trust for the technology component of this podcast, the choice was simple: Information Systems in Montana. Whether purchasing products for business or when I had them build me a new MacBook to catch child predators, they delivered, creating a solution for my exact needs. Contact Information Systems in Montana today. Everybody needs a good insurance plan. Whether it's for home or auto insurance, check out Heinbaugh Agency. Eric Heinbaugh is a local agent focused only on customer service, not sales. If you're passionate about firearms and the Second Amendment like I am, one of the best places in all of Montana to go is Mitchell Supply. Jim and Tammy Mitchell have been running this gun store for decades. They're major supporters of the Second Amendment, and they're major supporters of our community. And obviously, they're supporters of this podcast. For all your firearms needs, go check out Mitchell Supply today. So now you're a colonel now, right?
I am, yeah.
You've been promoted to full. How much longer do you plan on staying in?
So I got promoted a year ago. I took command of a unit in July, a higher level unit. And all this stuff about campaigning and all that came in the fall. In the fall, I finally realized I need to do this. And, over the course of my 3 deployments, I graduated from law school and didn't take the bar for almost 2 years. And then my second deployment, I actually was out of the law for 2 years. Wow. I had to shut down my law firm, and I went active duty for all of 2010 to help prepare the unit. And then I was gone for all of 2011. And then in 22, I was gone. So I've basically had almost 5 years of setting aside the law to do Army. And so this time I said, this opportunity is not going to come around. These don't just come around. I mean, yeah, right. There's elections every 2 years, but I really felt that if I was going to run for the court, I wanted to run for the Chief Justice position. And so I said, I got to do this. So I went to my boss, and she was very, very, my Army boss, she was very understanding, and I really appreciate her I just said, look, I hate to do this to you, but I'm asking if you can put someone else in command, because I do need to run this race. And we talked through it all. She was very understanding and just really supportive. And instead of just calling me a slacker and, hit me on the head and get back out there and fight the war. So she did. So I gave up command of my unit just actually recently in January. And so I'm still in the National Guard, but in a position, because when you're in a command position, it's a lot. I mean, it's conference calls once or twice a week. It's emails. It's documents all the time. It's extra drill weekends. And I just said, there's no way I can be a good, if I campaign, I'm going to be a really bad brigade commander. I can't do that. And I'll probably be a bad father and husband. So I felt like, and I have a time commitment to being a county attorney that it's kind of curtailing my campaign activity, but that's just the way it is. I'm the county attorney there. There's, I'm always carrying a caseload of a certain number of cases that have to go to trial or get resolved. So I just felt that it was something I just couldn't keep, burning the candle at every end. So out of that, I'm still a colonel. I'm working through the process of retiring from the Guard, and it's not an overnight process. There's a bunch of paperwork and things you have to do. So we're in the process of doing that.
Okay, so awesome. Yeah,
that was a very long answer to
That's okay.
a short question.
No, congratulations, and thank you so much for your service. I mean, I really admire everything that you did for us, and thank you. It means the world to me.
And the funny thing is I did it for the unit. Because it was the unit that, this last time in particular, it was a unit I had previously commanded, the unit I'd spent many years with in 2 prior deployments. I mean, and so that was what happened. It's just the way it worked out. I was the guy available. I jokingly say They reached to the bottom of the barrel, and I was the only one there, but I was grateful I was still in the barrel.
Absolutely.
And so I did it. But I mean, I don't see that surprise deployment happening again. It's just at the level I'm at, and the units that we have a Montana unit that's deployed right now, in fact, in the Middle East. So even if I were to stay in a little bit longer, I don't see any surprise deployments on the horizon. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you for your service. That's amazing. I love the story. I like it because none of what you said sounded simple or didn't sound without massive logistics. And I think it's really important for everyone to see and understand that, because there's a lot of people out there that haven't served or have a family member that served. And people forget that when you're in the guard, everyone's like, oh, you're the guard, you're the weekend warrior. And it's like, it is a ton. We have a ton of deputies and detention officers at the sheriff's office that are in the guard. And those poor men and women with all their logistics, it's insane.
It's tough.
And the families that have to deal with it, it's a huge challenge. So.
But I think it makes them better employees doing their other job too. I mean, my leadership experience from the military has just been invaluable.
It's funny. Our command team is about split 50-50 with, people that have served and people that haven't. And it's interesting because they both have different strengths and weaknesses. But there's certain things that my military people I can count on with. There's certain just little things that are just so predictable, and that's comforting in my position. I'm like, it's very comforting.
Yeah.
And it was funny when I first started, I didn't have anybody who had military experience. I had nobody. And our leadership team has never been better than it is today. And I do think attribute that we got a good mix of military people and leadership. And you're right. It's absolutely total necessary skill set. And it does, and anyone who tells you that it does not translate into the civilian world has no idea what they're talking about.
Right.
None.
And then there's the other side of that coin, which is just because you're a veteran doesn't mean you're necessarily the the greatest person.
Yeah. No,
I've had cases where someone's committed or they're accused of a pretty bad crime, and they're like, but I'm a veteran. And I'm like, well, that's not an excuse to go do this. Like, come on, you don't get a free pass.
We're not going to play that game.
In fact, my expectations are a little higher of you, but I try not to let that affect me, but it's certainly when it comes to, I had a guy we were sentencing, we'd already agreed on it. He'd already had the deal, and he wanted to testify. And so he starts telling us all these stories about, he had been in the same places around the same time I was. So I knew the lay of the land. And so he's telling me, I was in Ramadi and blah, 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 and all this, and I got blown up, and this happened, and this happened. And so I had his DD-214, which is the discharge paperwork you get from the military. And I'm like, well, I don't see a Purple Heart on here. You said you got wounded 3 times and evacuated to Germany. Where's the Purple Heart? Well, they didn't give it to me. I got, like, well, okay. And then he told me how he pulled this guy out of the building. I'm like, well, where's your ARCOM with V device? And so pretty quickly we realized he was lying, and it didn't go well. So I just said, just take the deal, move along. Don't come in here and try to lie to us. But
all right, so I got a question for you before we go.
Uh-oh.
It's I'm gonna look something up here. I'm only doing this.
Is this trivia or is this hypothetical?
Pressure's on. No. This is not trivia. No, this is public education.
Okay.
But I want it from your perspective because this is something that is out there all the time, and there's huge arguments over this. So, and I realize this is United States Constitution stuff, but it's important because it affects a lot of local decisions. So, talk to me about the Supremacy Clause.
The Supremacy Clause.
Because, and I'll preface this in a very appropriate way. As a sheriff, everyone thinks that I have special power.
Yes. I'm aware of the sheriff's special power cult that's out there.
I have special powers. And there's some things that, I'm the only last really elected, county attorney's a law enforcement official too, but like gun carrying law enforcement official in
We're not-
America.
what? We don't
I
get to
guess you
carry
gu-
guns?
I
What?
guess you guys can now. Actually, no. With all law changes, you guys can. So
I don't even know
I'm the
anymore.
last in a uniform wearing. Okay,
yeah.
and so this comes up all the time. Is that people will tell me, "Hey, you need to go arrest those ATF agents in town. You need to, go do this." And I have a little confusion about it too. And I have confusion about it because I've actually read the whole Constitution and I study it. And there is some things in there, and I have an impression in my mind of what it is, but I want to hear yours. So talk to me about what the Supremacy Clause means, Article 6, and how it affects what special powers it gives the federal government as it relates to locals.
Okay. So as I do with every hypothetical like this, my answer is always the same.
Okay.
Ask your county attorney.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
I'm teasing.
So
No,
we're done.
Here's the answer.
We're done.
So have you bugged Josh about this?
All the time.
All the time. Okay.
All the time.
So
In fact, I tease him and all the county attorneys about it on a daily basis. We have great banter about it.
So I will say the backstory on this, not so much this, but the tangential issue is the whole label of chief law enforcement officer in the county.
Yes.
So when I became a new county attorney, I had a former county attorney who told me, "You're the chief law enforcement officer in the county." And I said, "Have you told my shurif?"
Exactly.
Because that's not what he says.
Oh, yes.
And so we always have this little friendly back and forth on that. And so the next part is where the sheriffs say, "I'm a constitutional sheriff." So I've told my peers, county attorneys, we need to steal that from them. Like we need to start saying, "I'm a constitutional county attorney." Let's take that label from them. So
Well, we all should be.
we should all be. You guys are better at media and marketing, all that. Like county attorneys hate to get on the news. Like whenever I see a press conference about a case, I'm like, "Oh, don't invite me. I don't want to talk about it. We only want to talk about things in court." But anyway, I digress.
It's a song for a different time, right?
I think you have to read the entire Constitution to answer that question. Because
agree.
as I said at the beginning, the Constitution clearly lays out that this is a federal system. And when I say federal, I mean federalism. What does that mean? It means that the powers that belong to the federal government, the national government, are specific and are enumerated in the Constitution. But that is supposed to be the limit of their powers. All other powers are reserved by the states, as in they're held by the states. So when we generally talk about the general police power, that generally refers to states' police power. And police power can be police, but it means more than that. It means the governance of lives within the parameters of individual liberty, what the power people give. So power to regulate interstate commerce, power to provide for an army and navy, power to coin money, all those various enumerated powers that belong to the federal government that are enumerated in the Constitution. And it doesn't say that federal law shall be the supreme law of the land. It says this Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land. In other words, the state of Montana or the state of Louisiana or whoever can't decide, we're going to issue our own money. We're going to go, we're going to go find some area where the Constitution clearly lays out this is a federal power and start intruding into it. That actually is probably what came up with the whole Texas border thing, right? Mm-hmm. We don't send ambassadors from Montana to go to France and say, no, we represent,
right.
Forget about what this guy said about relations with the United States. We're going to tell you how it is. But in those areas where the Constitution has said this is federal power, then the Constitution is supreme, and generally where those federal powers are pursuant to the Constitution, they occupy that space and the state can't take it up. But it doesn't mean that all federal laws are the supreme power of the land, because there are many areas where constitutionally that power is reserved to the state. And
Correct.
Even if the feds pass a law or do an executive order that's gone beyond the Constitution, which they do a lot of that, the state doesn't have to acquiesce to that. That what you do is you challenge it and say, this is a state power, this is not a federal power, so butt out. So I think that's the misnomer. People like to say the Supremacy Clause means the federal government is supreme in all areas. No. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, saying every state will have a Republican form of government, and this is our structure. And 2 senators from Montana, right? We send 3, it's not going to matter because the federal Constitution says we only get 2. But what it doesn't mean is that the federal government can dictate outcomes on every random thing in every community. A lot of those intrusions are going to be intrusions on this police power that the state has, not only inherently in terms of our Republican form of government, but also a proper understanding of the Constitution says this particular issue is not a national government issue. This is a state government issue, and therefore the national government should butt out. So back to sheriffs, you guys are the elected law enforcement officer for the county, for that state, where you enforce state law, right, and municipal too, to the extent that some counties have like almost no municipal ordinance.
Oh yeah, we have to. Yeah,
but the problem is that state-federal partnership. It really needs to be a partnership where we understand clearly each other's roles. I think if it's coming to what was the example? ATF. So ATF, if they're doing an investigation where they're investigating some illegal trafficking of arms or whatever, and they're doing that in Montana, I think generally the practice is that they're going to give the sheriff a heads up when they're working in this area. There was a bill this last session that didn't pass, thankfully, but it was basically saying that if federal agents execute a search warrant in anywhere in Montana and they haven't previously notified the sheriff, the county attorney has to go arrest them. I'm like, give me a break. That's not going to happen, because if a federal agent has a federal search warrant, that means a Article III judge or a magistrate got that and authorized, and that's an order, and they're enforcing a federal law. That's where this idea that county attorneys have to go prosecute someone for doing their job federally is going to be it's going to be a train wreck.
See, I liked that bill amended.
I don't remember the amended.
The amended is they took that out.
What? Okay.
They took it out, but they basically said it was a misdemeanor, I think is what they said, if you didn't. And I liked that part because I worry about blue on blue, cop on cop issues,
right,
as in we point guns at each other because we're not talking to each other.
Right.
And so that's where I worried about it, because that stuff, I don't like that stuff. It makes us look unprofessional. It makes us look like we don't know what we're doing. It makes us a danger to the public, which we're not supposed to be.
Right.
And a lot of people were frustrated with that, saying, well, that doesn't have any teeth if it's just a misdemeanor. And I said, well, it does, because the federal government, oftentimes, if there's a state law that is a problem, they won't go there. I've worked federal cases, and they're like, yeah, we're not going to go there, because if we break a law during this, it's going to be argued in court, and that's going to hurt our case. And so I agree with you partially. My question about the Supremacy Clause that I've always had is, when you read the Supremacy Clause, it basically says that, that Article 6 says that it is the supreme law of the land, and it actually refers to judges. And my understanding it is, if it goes up to the United States Supreme Court and there's a decision decided, it's really not a law, it's an opinion, but it's an opinion then that affects all the laws across the country.
Yeah, we call it case law.
Yeah, exactly.
It becomes the law to that case, and then that precedent is controlling as to other similar situations.
But then when I look at the law enforcement side of it, on the 10th Amendment, there's no powers given to the federal government for actual law enforcement. And so I always view the Supremacy Clause as, when the Constitution was written, there wasn't federal agents. So they haven't really accounted for them in federal law. And I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm not trying to create that type of conspiracy.
Right.
But what I'm saying is it is an issue. And back to Chief Law Enforcement Officer, which I think is super funny, right? And Josh and I argue about it. I won the argument. No, I'm just kidding. I won the argument jokingly. But here's the hypocrite thing of this whole thing. I get these forms. They're called 4473s. If someone buys a machine gun or suppressor, and they come to me, and it says, must notify the CLEO, Chief Law Enforcement Officer. And so the federal government on their form sends it to me and calls me the chief law enforcement
Well,
officer.
then they must be wrong. You can't trust the feds. We've been over this.
But here's my point that I kind of wanted to air out on this podcast is it's hilarious because and I blame both parties.
Yeah.
I blame local government and the feds. On one side, they say, no, we have all the power and authority. On the other side, they say, no, we have the power of authority. And then both sides will say, no, you have the power and authority.
Yeah.
And I often think what it really comes down to is this. We have the power of authority when we want to get things done, but when we want to hold the liability bag, we'll just point it off to you. And you can, but there is some, I don't know what the answer to that problem is. And I just hope someday that we actually all play in the sandbox together like we're supposed to and work for the people.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating. And then there's people out there who read a piece of paperwork where the federal government writes chief law enforcement officer on it, and it goes to me. Yeah. And they're like, well, you are. Look, it's right here.
Well, I think all joking aside, you are the chief law enforcement officer for your jurisdiction. I don't know how you guys work out the city county thing because you have a city chief of police that's the chief law enforcement officer for the city police force. I don't think the county attorney is a chief law enforcement officer. We are a prosecution officer, an officer of the court, but we're not law enforcement. And we try very hard. We've actually had a training on this last December. I helped do it at the county attorneys. We tried really hard to make sure that prosecutors know that you're not an investigating officer. You're not a law enforcement officer.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of times we'll have a bad crime scene. We need to go to it as a prosecutor. But you're there to observe and to, basically be informed of what's going on. Maybe there'd be some discussions of how to preserve evidence. You are not there to investigate.
Absolutely.
Because you got to.
Because then you become a witness.
Yeah, you could become a witness. Now you can't even prosecute the case. You're a witness. And that's an issue.
We actually here assign one of my detectives full-time to the county attorney's office.
Yeah.
Because of that. Because we were running into issues during witness interviews and what have you, where only the attorneys are witnessing the information, and there was case law about it, which I thought was good case law. Mm-hmm. Actually, I know it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but at the end of the day, I can wrap my head around that. That's blurring that line for prosecutors. And I don't, the whole supremacy clause thing, I'm not trying
I'd have to look at that a little bit more before I could give you an opinion.
Oh, I get it. And I'm not trying to make light of it. I'm really not. It is a seriously frustrating issue because there's a lot of conflicting information out there about it. And depending upon, and of course, a lot of people only read the side of the information they want, and what I want to believe about it. Mm-hmm. But there is a lot of conflicting information about that out there. And I think it's something that is it's just one of those things where the administrative state of federal government has gotten so big, right? It's kind of outpaced what our founding fathers intended. Yeah. And so it has to be dealt with at some point.
But I think as a bookend on that, I think you're going to see in coming years a renewal of focus on the 10th Amendment. I know of some cases federally that are working their way through the process that I think this Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, may grant cert on those. And I think that there's a kind of a reexamination of that issue because I think there was a case, and I haven't researched this lately. I did long ago. There was a case long ago that kind of gutted the 10th Amendment. And I think that's I don't think that's a permanent fixture. There's recently been two cases where the court has heard about deferring to national administrative agencies on their interpretation of laws under what was called the Chevron doctrine.
Yes.
And I listened to both those oral arguments, and this court is clearly trying to, I don't know if they're trying to assert a certain thing or they're trying to clean up messy old, precedents. But I do see, I don't know, I think the next few years are going to be interesting on both those points. I
agree. And then, so probably my last question for you, because you are running for Montana Supreme Court as the Chief Justice. One of the things, we hope educate everyone out there and understand that these are court opinions that are case law. Mm-hmm. But just because they're an opinion now doesn't mean they'll be an opinion in the future. Because I don't think a lot of people understand that. I think people get this in their mind, but facts can be litigated again and under different circumstances can change case law. Can you
talk about that? Yeah.
but just like in a very layman way of talking, discussing.
Yeah, and so that's a word that a lot of lawyers use that people may not, hear often, and that's case law. And so, and basically, let's say we take any random statute. I had a deal dealing with a subdivision, and when a road that's dedicated within a subdivision becomes a public road, and who's the holder of the easement. It's like a really nuanced easement road issue that I've dealt with a lot of road issues. I hadn't dealt with this one until, I don't know, November, whenever I did it. So, and whenever that happens, you look at the statute, and then you go and you look at all the Montana Supreme Court cases that ever held anything on that, ever ruled on that. And you read them all, and you figure out these various facts in this situation, and here's the holding. And when we say the holding, this is important. This goes back to judges that go beyond what the case requires. The holding is the decision that decides the controversy between the parties on that case. And rules and pronouncements beyond the holding are called dicta. And they're not necessarily, they might be a good guide as to the law, but they may not be controlling. The holding is controlling, right? Okay. So I take a holding of a case of when this particular easement was established and who holds the easement. And then I compare it to my case. And that holding from that case is controlling so long as the facts are the same. But facts often aren't the same. Facts are different. So we call that distinguishing this case from that. So we have to know the law well and decide, well, would this holding apply exactly to this case, or would it be different because the facts are different? And so when we talk about evaluating precedent, I used to think that when I went into law school, I thought they were going to give me a great big shelf of books and say, read all these books and now you're a lawyer because this is the law.
Right.
And the reality is this, and conservatives hate to hear this, by the way, this next thing I'm going to say, the law is always changing because every time a court rules on an issue, and particularly if a Supreme Court, the highest appellate court in any jurisdiction, rules on an issue, that may adjust our interpretation and understanding of the law in some way. And so that law can always be just changing a little bit. That's why the temptation for a judge to go beyond the holding is so mighty, because they can be like, well, this narrow decision right here will decide the controversy between these two litigants. But I can imagine 4 other cases, if I just went a little bit farther and pronounced this rule, it would resolve all these other hypothetical situations. You can't do that.
Right.
Because when you get to those hypothetical situations, the facts might be different.
Absolutely.
So you have to decide the case narrowly to resolve the controversy between those two parties, and then that other hypothetical situation, let that thing develop in the district court. Let that district court judge do their job of working through the facts, working through the law.
That holding can create issues or change other cases.
Yes.
If all the facts were to be the same or are very closely similar. But if they're not, then, or if there's just one fact that's out of whack, that doesn't work.
So what happens is, in that case, we predict. Lawyers predict. We are risk managers. The memo that I just wrote on this subdivision was, this is the issue, this is the law, here's a prior case. If this came to a court, I believe the court would rule this for this reason. Even though the facts are a little bit different, I think this is what would come out. That's how we try to understand the law. That's how we apply precedent. Precedent may not be, the closer you can get a case to a prior precedent, we call it, if it's all on all fours with that prior case, that's what I call it. That means it's really close, we're pretty sure this precedent will apply. But guess what? If the legislature changes the statute, that precedent may not be any good anymore.
Absolutely.
If it's statutory. If the facts are different, if a national Supreme Court opinion or even a Ninth Circuit opinion has changed our understanding of the law, that might change that precedent. So those precedents, we want solid precedents because it helps us to rely upon law from a predictability point of view.
It helps your risk management.
It helps my risk management. But that's why the precedents should be confined to the necessary holding to resolve the case. If you start the Noli case, perfect example, clear, easy holding on that case. But no, the court went way beyond it, And now there's all this unpredictability here, and we're not quite sure where some of those search and seizure issues land. How are we going to find those out? About 5 more cases that are going to go to the Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
That's how we're going to find it out.
That's exactly how we're going to find out.
So precedents, then we get to some circumstances where courts will come back and they'll just say, yeah, this precedent is wrong, and we have to recognize it's wrong, and we have to overrule it. That's fine if it's done for valid reasons. The problem we have is that many times in the past, the Montana Supreme Court has been known for overturning itself on a regular basis. In fact, at one point, there was a law review article that was done. I think I was just shortly out of law school, and that we were like, the Montana Supreme Court at that time, this is in the mid-2000s, was kind of the leader of overturning its own precedent. That's the mark of an activist court. Mm-hmm. That's the mark of a court that either its prior precedents went beyond the holding to more than they should have, or currently the court wants to change the law, so it has to go back and deal with 5 prior holdings that it doesn't like. So that's my issue. That's not exciting stuff. that is scholar hours and hours reading and toiling through a proper understanding of the law. But the end result, we hope, is a law that we can have more confidence in, and a court process that we can have more confidence in.
But I'm glad you explained that. I'm glad you talked about that, because a lot of people, I just hear them say weird things like, "Oh, well, it's the law of the land. This is where it's always going to be." And I'm always like, if you can find the right case out there that's out there and it gets litigated and it goes to the Supreme Court, it could get changed. The circumstances can change because the facts of that case are particularly different. And sometimes people don't understand the cases that get ruled on a certain way in the Supreme Court is because someone in the executive branch failed to do something that is normally done.
Yeah.
And it creates we call it like basically creating sometimes they'll say that your decision created a bad ruling. Mm-hmm. And that it gets put on there. Another thing, just real quick, that I wanted to kind of hit on, because I think there's just so much good information here when we talk about all this, is this is a big misnomer that people have. And I could probably explain this okay, but I want you to kind of explain it to everybody. There's a misnomer out there that any case, doesn't matter what it is, could always go to the United States Supreme Court. And people fail to understand that if there's no federal nexus to that crime,
exactly right.
It's almost inverse supremacy clause. But it will stop at the Montana Supreme Court, and it can't be litigated any further because there's no federal nexus. Can you kind of explain that?
It's a great point. So going back to what you said a minute ago about inverse supremacy clause. So there are a lot of times when let's just pick a federal district court, in here in Great Falls, is working on some case that's a federal case that's properly in federal court. It has jurisdiction. But there might be an interpretation of state law that requires the court, that has to be interpreted properly for the court to finish its case. So that court, the district court, Judge Morris here, could certify that issue to the Montana Supreme Court and say, this particular part of the case requires you to tell me how you interpret state law. It's not my job to interpret state law on this issue. It's your job. And so he'll certify that to the Montana Supreme Court. Montana Supreme Court will give back an opinion interpreting that particular issue of state law as applied in that case back to the federal court, and the federal court then relies upon that to go forward. So that's an example where courts are implicitly recognizing this separation. Mm-hmm. And in some areas where the Montana Supreme Court's holding on a case is supreme over federal courts, right? Exactly. So there's 2 ways that a case can go to the U.S. Supreme Court. The traditional old-fashioned way is a case starts in any federal district court. And whatever that final outcome is, that it's appealed to an appellate circuit. We're in the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth rules on it, and one of the parties appeals to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court can decide whether or not to take it. U.S. Supreme Court doesn't have to take every case. They have to take a case. It's called granting certiorari. And a lot of times the reasons why they take a case is they look for maybe the Ninth Circuit says this issue, and the Second Circuit disagrees and says this. And so they're like, well, there's a split among the circuits. So then if the Fifth Circuit next month has to review the issue, they're going to say, well, we don't know what to do because the Ninth said this and the Second said this. So the Supreme Court says, we'll take it and resolve it. There's other reasons why something may go to the U.S. Supreme Court. But that's one way. The other way something can go to the U.S. Supreme Court is if it's a final ruling on a case at the Montana Supreme Court, the highest appellate court in any particular state. And the one of the parties petitions for it to go from the Montana Supreme Court to the U.S. Supreme Court. But you're exactly right. It has to have a federal legal or constitutional interpretation issue that requires the U.S. Supreme Court, or even gives the U.S. Supreme Court permission to review the case. If we're dealing with solely state law and solely constitutional law issue, then it's not going to go from state to federal court. It would have to be where the Montana Supreme Court rules and they interpret the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution in a way that is of interest to the U.S. Supreme Court. And they say, yeah, we need to take that. So you're right. And by the way, as a general rule, I mean, there's a ton of cases that get up to they're eligible for the U.S. Supreme Court every year, and there's a ton of cases where people apply for cert, and a very small number are granted. So as a general rule, you shouldn't count on the U.S. Supreme Court taking your case.
I just say that because I hear all the time, and a lot of times it's in civil litigation or it's like a DUI. And someone's like, we're going to take that to the United States Supreme Court.
Good luck.
And I'm like, it's not going to go there. It's done here. And so I'm glad you kind of explained that because I think that's a big misnomer out there. So before we close, what do people need to know about you? Like, where do they contact you? All that good stuff.
So, so I'm running for Montana Supreme Court Chief Justice. First of all, there's two positions. In case people aren't aware of that, there's two positions. So I'm running for Chief Justice. My opponent is a man named Jeremiah Lynch. He's a former federal magistrate out of Missoula. The other position is the Associate Justice position, and there's two state district judges running for that job. Catherine Bittigary is out of eastern Montana, and Dan Wilson is out of the Flathead. So I will tell you, I've had a lot of folks that I've talked to that are supporters of Wilson, and they're like, well, now what are we going to do? And I said, well, no, Wilson's running for a different job.
Yeah,
in case
it's important.
We're clear.
Yeah.
It's not where, there's 7 members of the court, and then they select the chief. For whatever reason, the chief is a separate position you have to run for. So number one. Number two, swansonforjustice.com is my website, and please check it out. I've got my bio in there. I've got a link to donate. I also have a Facebook page. You can go to Cory Swanson or Cory Swanson for Justice Facebook. Find me, and you'll find either my personal or my campaign page, and go from there. I am a neophyte when it comes to Twitter. Okay. I had Twitter years ago in 2014 when I first ran for county attorney. I discovered there were like 2 people in all of Broadwater County that had Twitter. So I'm like, I'm not going to use this. So we've reestablished Twitter account. I don't even know how to use the darn thing. I mean, I'm like, I've turned into the old man. How do I make this thing work? So we're working on Twitter. Find me on Facebook is the easiest way.
Okay, great. And then, so you said you have a donate button.
Yep.
So people can go in there and just click the button, drop their credit card info in there and donate. And then I take it, is it $790 your max?
So what does this tell you about inflation in this country?
Yeah.
See, I mean, it was $700 was the max contribution, and then when the year rolled around, it increases to $790. So
okay.
So $790 is the max contribution.
Max individual per individual. So
correct. And currently, there's only 2 candidates. So if there only remains 2 candidates, then there won't be a primary and a general election.
Right.
If a third candidate gets in, then there will be a primary and a general. One of us will get kicked out in June.
And what that means to everyone watching is that means you get to donate twice.
Yep.
So you could donate $790 in the primary and then turn around and do it again in the general. So
that's right.
Because that's important though for people to understand.
It is.
And it's hard. I mean, raising money is so hard. Oh my gosh.
It's tough.
It is tough.
Yeah.
But it's important because you've got to get out there and do everything and go. And you're statewide, right? There's no district here.
No district. I'm statewide. And aside from that, I have a very demanding job that I'm loath to travel and all that. I love to campaign. I love talking to people. Good. It's so fun. I love connecting with people on the phone, and unfortunately, like I was talking to someone the other night that I hadn't talked to in a while, and I think we talked for over an hour. And so I'm like, oh, this is great. And they're like, oh man, it's an hour. Go call somebody else. So
Exactly.
But I love,
That's the challenge, though.
yeah, but
That
I
is the
love
challenge.
campaigning. It's a lot
Good.
of fun. So
Good. Well,
Yeah.
wish the best of luck to you, and thank you so much for coming on, and super educational. I learned a ton. So,
well, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And thank you for what you're doing. This is fun. I love how you're spreading the message and communicating with your community. This is very creative.
Yeah, got to figure out a way to do it.
Yeah.
And you just got to meet them where they are. And right now they're on podcast. So
Yeah.
that's where we got to go.
Yeah.
So anyway,
All right.
God bless you, Cory, and
Thank
good
you.
luck to you.
Take care.
Hey, everybody. Jesse Slaughter with the Pursuit Podcast. And we really appreciate the amazing support already that this channel has received. Our social media is blowing up. Everywhere we look, people are liking and clicking and commenting. But what we really need you to do is subscribe to our Facebook page and follow us on Spotify. That's what drives this channel. That's what's going to keep this channel going forever. Tim and Ben are behind the scenes doing tireless editing, working on this to make this come out the way it does, this high quality product that it is. So please go in there, click subscribe, click follow, and make sure that this channel sticks around for a long time, because we truly believe it's doing a lot of great things for our community. But there's many, many other people out there who we need to support. So follow and subscribe today. Thank you.